30 years. It's been 30 years since one of the most magical and timeless seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine was released on the television screens and cassette tapes for British audiences to witness. This is Series 3. Who knew that this would be my second favorite season of Thomas and Friends, right? Brett Allcroft and David Minton at this point really devoted their passion and care into what was this little show about talking engines. Series 3 began as 2 VHS releases in 1991, with early takes for the first-time narrator Michael Angelis. Then, they dubbed another take of Angelis' narration, and released those versions of the first 16 episodes to television later that same year. Something felt off, though. Only those 16 episodes aired that year, and then the rest of the regular 26 episodes aired the next year. What was the reasoning for this? Simple. The funding source. Brett and David didn't have all the funds required to complete the season in a single year, since the second half of the series required complications such as cell animation, action scenes, and working water sets. Because of this, I'm going to split my talk on Series 3 into 2 parts. This video will discuss the first 16 episodes from 1991, and then I'll release another video talking about the rest of the season in January 2022, when those videos will actually be 30 years old. So welcome to my first Thomas video, an in-depth look at the magic of Series 3. I want to put a spotlight on 5 specific episodes that really showcase the true nature of this series and why I care about it so much. First though, I would like to share some facts and tidbits regarding the overall nature of the season. First off, and most importantly, Michael Angelis. This was his first series narrating the show, and I respect how he grew to be the show's best narrator. He was a talented individual, and I enjoy his energy and character voices that somehow were leagues upward from Ringo Starr's. Angelis will always be in my heart, despite being an American viewer. And I just want to say, rest in peace, man. Next is the model work. After the cancellation of Mitten's other show, Tugs, which is a topic of its own accord, Thomas had a significant upgrade in quality when it came to its visuals. This is evident in the camera angles and especially the water sets. Beforehand, it looked murky and static most of the time, but now it looks clear and realistic, which I deeply appreciate. This just goes to show that the budget was getting higher, so the show wouldn't have the same dull visual scheme throughout. You know, the longer they did it, the better. Lastly, I should talk about a man who happened to be involved with this season that many would be surprised at. Andrew Brenner. Yep, you heard me right. The guy who did seasons 17 to 21 of the show. The famous CGI Brenner era. The guy who wrote the best Thomas movie, Sodor's freaking Legend of the Lost Treasure. He happened to be involved with this season's history. What Allcroft and Minton did was adapt his original magazine stories at the time and bring them into this season so they could save some of Audrey's stories for the 4th series. However, I find it controversial that Allcroft and Minton credited the stories as their own and didn't ask permission to use them. Maybe they predicted Brenner would work on the show several years later if he found out by surprise, so who knows. Well, I'm not going to waste any more time. Here are the 5 Spotlight episodes that are my personal favorites and, in my opinion, define the nature of Series 3. They are as follows. Percy's Promise. Man, this episode is intense, and I love it. That entire storm scene showcases how even the 3rd series wasn't afraid to try and show suspense, from its visuals to music, and most of all, the narration. Angelis is top-notch with his narration in this, and I appreciate how his storytelling makes this episode a cozy watch. I love how the music builds up to the climactic point when Percy gets stuck in the flood, and then it concludes on a happy note upon him escaping the waters. There's so much I could say that I'd be here for 18 hours. Definitely deserves its place on my list of Spotlight episodes. Henry's Forest. What is there to say that hasn't already been said universally? This is a beautiful episode. It's known for how Andrew Brenner wrote this story, and thus, the Reverend Audrey despised it for how out of character it was for Henry to observe nature. However, I disagree with Audrey's point, since this rather expands him with a side of his personality nobody expected beforehand. This episode has some of the best music, and, by extension, some of the best narration in the entire show.
But one night, everything changed.
I also really like how it's not much of a story, but rather a chance to sit back and watch how nature can take a turn for the worse. It's an episode that's been discussed to death, so I won't say much more. Overall, a really emotional and down-to-earth episode. The Trouble with Mud. Who knew that a single episode could expand on not one, but two of my favorite characters at once? In this case being Gordon and James. James's subplot may be awkwardly stitched with Gordon's, but it still works as a pretty fun story in the end. The character dialogue and delivery from Angelus are top-notch. The music is wonderful, and there was something so pleasing to my eye when I was 6 or 7 when it came to watching these autumn sets. The way they place the leaves and sleek look on Gordon's hill just gives me cozy vibes. Don't know if that's just me or not. I wish we got more episodes like this where it could expand on more than one character at once and deliver some of the funniest and, dare I say it, some of the most underrated scenes in the entire series. An all-around comfy and hilarious episode that definitely deserves more attention. Thomas, Percy, and the Dragon. Episodes where these two let their sibling rivalry shine are when Thomas is at its finest, in my opinion. And you're gonna hate me for saying this, but even the All Engines Go reboot happens to know that. As weird as that sounds. Anyway, this episode is absolutely fun and lighthearted. I love the moral, the creepy look at the dragon, and the dialogue between the two main characters is really sweet and relatable. But the best part of this episode, why I put it on the spotlight list? This part.
Percy was asleep in his sidings and had no idea that Thomas was approaching him.
Absolutely perfect. Music, visuals, all of it. And the fact the narration stopped to let the creeps come in is just stellar. This episode deserves a spot on my list. You can change my mind all you want, but it's not gonna fix it. And finally, trust Thomas. Who could have guessed that this would be my favorite of the season, right? This episode was the first I ever watched of Thomas. I remember watching this for the first time as a toddler and adoring the show ever since, considering it got its own DVD and all. This episode could be a great start for anyone new to Thomas like it was for me. I love the comfy sets, the character interactions, the crash, James and Gordon's interactions, Bertie being a prick at the start, the crash, that little toad, how the subplots intertwine, the crash. You get my point! Trust Thomas is an absolute must when it comes to characters, model work, and how to make the perfect episode of Thomas the Tank Engine. Given that it was a magazine story written by Andrew Brenner, it shocks me how expertly crafted it was. Please go check it out right now. Of course, these aren't the only episodes I love from the first half of the season, but they're some of my favorites not just for this season, but for the entire show. Some honorable mentions for me include A Scarf for Percy, solely for Angelus's first go at narrating the franchise, as well as the memorable dialogue, Thomas, Percy, and the Post Train for visuals alone, Time for Trouble for great character moments, and No Joke for James for the simple yet fun premise featuring my boy. Overall, this first half of the season excels when it comes to its character-driven stories. The Spotlight episodes are my pieces of evidence for why I truly appreciate that. Well, I think I've covered all I need to for right now regarding why Series 3 is so magical. In conclusion, I really admire those first 16 episodes that fleshed out our favorite characters and brought a fresh quality of life through its visuals, music, and most especially, narration. Thomas has had so many brilliant gems when it came to certain seasons, and for me, this will always be a close second behind my true favorite season, Series 5. Which I'm planning on making a video surrounding that series too. I look forward to talking about the rest of the series when the 1992 episodes turn 30 years old. And I hope you look forward to it too.
Now Henry can see the trees growing strong and tall, and the animals are coming back. Sometimes everywhere is quiet. At other times, Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here.